business in the state of New York. That could spell the end of his business empire. David Schoen is with us. He was an attorney on Trump's defense team in the second impeachment trial and speaks with the president regularly. Good morning, David. It's good to have you. I thought it was interesting that Chris Kise, one of the president's attorneys, said, quote, "In my 33 years, I have not had a witness testify better." Do you agree?
I don't have any idea what he means by that. But I think that from President Trump's perspective, you know, it was a good day for him in that he stood up to what he believes to be a very unfair proceeding, when much of America believes to be an unfair proceeding. I'm not sure why they called him as a witness, frankly. This case is quickly becoming, or has become already, a circus. And I think this just added to it. I think the judge one of his comments epitomized the entire situation when he said, "I don't want to hear what he has to say." I'm not sure what purpose was served, except that I do think it will help President Trump in the polls. I think he stood up to a court that he believes to be unfair, and sort of like for every American who supports him, you know, he called him a bully and that sort of thing. I think that serves him well in the polls politically.
But David, you're forgetting the second part of the judge's statement. Quote, "We are here to hear him answer questions, and most of the time he's not." I take you on your point about what the judge said, but that's the totality of what he said. Would you have advised Trump then to take the fifth if you were his counsel?
Well, first of all, that's not in his personality, as you know, I'm sure.
He did it a lot in the deposition.
I think that yes, but this is a very public forum. And I think that he wanted to stand up for this judge. Listen, this is one of the cases in which I think much of America feels it's unfair. You have an attorney general who campaigned on getting Trump, and then you have a case with a very unusual law, this Executive Law 6312. We hear fraud, but it doesn't require any showing of materiality, any showing of any losses, any showing of any victims. And so it strikes people as unfair, and he kind of spoke for those people yesterday.
Have you talked to Trump since yesterday, since his testimony?
Talked to or communicated with?
Either.
I have communicated with him
form,
since yesterday.
Text? What did he say?
I wouldn't say what he said, nor would I say what I said. But I think that, you know, he feels he needs to stand up to this kind of thing. He thinks he's being treated very unfairly. And he also, listen, as you know far better than I, this case and all of the cases are being tried on at least a couple of fronts. And he's the leading candidate for the Republican Party for president. And I really think you're going to see him soar again in the polls after what happened yesterday.
Does he care if he loses this case, if it helps him politically?
Of course he cares. He cares about all these cases. He takes them quite seriously. But he thinks that fundamentally they're politically driven by a political agenda and that they're very unfair. And he feels very strongly about that.
I want to ask you about the law in particular on one part. It seems like the prosecutors for the AG's office got some admission from the president when they basically got him to say absolutely when they asked repeatedly, did the banks review these documents and valuation? And then I want to read you a quote from Trump talking about the valuations that were presented to him before they went to the banks. Quote, "I would look at them, I would see them, and I would maybe on occasion have some suggestions." Do you think that the prosecution made some headway there on trying to get toward intent on that with that admission from the president?
I would think that had to be sort of their central purpose, was to put him directly into the statements. But I think I have to say I admire the fact that he didn't shy away from that. Look, there's so much more going on here with the banking business. I think, I talk to developers all the time about this. Some of them feel very strongly about it. Some real never-Trumpers feel very strongly about it. The banks were making a lot of money on this. They ended up making money. Nobody lost anything. And if, to the extent the AG argues, well, had he actually stated the values properly, the banks could have made more in fees. Number one, I don't think you find a very sympathetic audience for that. And number two, he would have gone to a different bank. There were a lot of banks who wanted to make these loans.
It doesn't matter if there's a sympathetic audience for the banks. But the other point is you give these numbers, you get more favorable loans. That's really the crux of it. And there doesn't need to be a victim for him to be held civilly liable. I wonder if Trump said yesterday also on the stand that the, quote, big bankers are going to come in and straighten this all out. Who are the big bankers?
I really don't know what their plan is for the defense, who they intend to call as witnesses. I'm sure they'll find some, persuasive witnesses.
Final question. On this debate over the worthless clause, Trump testified, quote, "There's a disclaimer clause where you don't have to get sued by the Attorney General of New York." He knows, this judge ruled months ago that worthless clause is worthless as a defense. It is, right?
I don't think it's worthless as a defense, but he knows that the judge ruled that. I think the banks clearly have an independent obligation of due diligence. This is more evidence of that, they've given a disclaimer. No bank is lending him money without doing their own due diligence on these properties.
David Schoen, always good to have you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.